You're not some elite operative, Hadley. You're a broken woman clinging to a uniform you don't deserve. That's what my stepmother said to me, in front of 43 guests, at my father's 65th birthday gala, with champagne still fizzing and crystal flutes, and the Savannah heat pressing through every window like a living thing. I didn't flinch. I didn't speak. I folded my napkin beside my untouched plate and let the silence do what silence does best. It terrified her. I learned the hard way that in my family, my silence was never seen as strength, only proof that I didn't matter. The night Claudette Miller stood at the head of my father's table and announced my struggle with reality to a room full of their country club friends, something inside me shifted like a bone that never set right. But I wasn't there for her approval. I was there to watch her destroy herself. She just didn't know that yet. My name is Hadley Voss. I'm 38 years old, and for the past 11 years, every person I've loved has believed I work as a data security consultant for federal logistics contractors. Boring, safe, forgettable. That was the point. The truth sits behind a classification wall that most people in that room couldn't spell, let alone access. I'm a lieutenant commander in the United States Navy, assigned to a non-disclosed unit affiliated with the National Security Agency. My specialty is cryptologic warfare, specifically the design of zero-trust encrypted communication architectures for naval fleet commands. I've built systems that protect 3 separate fleet commands. I designed a secure relay architecture that the NSA credited with preventing a $1.7 billion infrastructure breach of the Eastern Seaboard power grid during Operation Sentinel Shield in 2021. But to Claudette, I was the broken stepdaughter who did IT support. Growing up in the Voss household meant earning affection like rent. My mother died when I was 11. My father, Frank, a commercial real estate agent with a big laugh and a bigger need to be liked, remarried 6 years ago. Claudette Miller walked into our lives carrying a Chanel bag and an opinion about everything. She had a daughter, Lydia, who was 16 at the time. Sweet kid. Quiet. The kind of quiet that comes from learning early that her mother's moods were weather systems you tracked, not challenged. I was already deep into classified work by then. 11 years deep. I'd entered the Naval Academy at 22. The intense child, too curious, too quiet, too precise for the noise of a house that ran on charm and small talk. I transitioned to classified cyber operations at 27. By the time Claudette moved into my childhood home in Savannah, I was spending most of my days inside a SCIF, staring at blue monitors and tasting the metallic edge of recycled air, designing encryption architectures that would never carry my name. I told people I consulted. Some clients prefer discretion. That was the whole script. 5 words, enough to bore anyone into changing the subject. But Claudette didn't change the subject. She sharpened it into a weapon. It started small. Comments at Thanksgiving. Hadley's little computer job. A laugh that lingered a beat too long. Then it grew. When I missed my uncle's funeral 2 years ago, pulled into a 72-hour deployment window I couldn't disclose, Claudette told the entire family I'd checked into a rehabilitation facility. She told them I'd had a psychiatric breakdown in the Navy. She told them I'd been quietly discharged. She told them I was living in a delusional fantasy where I was still important. They hadn't just forgotten me. They'd rewritten me. By the time I pulled my rental car up the long gravel drive of the Voss estate for my father's birthday, Claudette's version of me was the only version anyone in that house had heard for years. The humid savanna air hit me the moment I stepped out, thick with jasmine and the kind of silence that pressed against my chest like a hand. Moss-covered oaks leaned like old secrets along the cracked pavement leading to the front porch. No one was waiting. No welcome. Not even a text from my father. Just Claudette's voice carrying through the screen door. "Oh, she actually came. Frank, your daughter's here. Try not to upset her." I carried my bag inside. The house smelled like roast chicken with rosemary and baked squash with brown sugar. Cornbread so buttery it stuck to the knife. She had even set the table with the heirloom china she used to save for Christmas, the set my mother had picked out 20 years ago. That detail landed harder than anything Claudette could have said out loud. Family photos lined the mantel above the fireplace. All of them featured Claudette and Frank. Claudette at a charity auction. Frank and Claudette at a ribbon cutting. Lydia's high school graduation with Claudette beaming in the center. A professional portrait of the three of them on the back porch. Golden hour light, matching linen. Not a single one of me. I set my bag by the staircase and walked into the dining room. 43 guests, white tablecloths, tea candles floating in glass bowls, a string quartet playing something soft enough to drown under conversation. Every guest rotated around Claudette's orbit. She moved through the room like a woman conducting an orchestra only she could hear. My father found me near the bar. He hugged me. It was brief. His eyes flicked to Claudette before he pulled away, as though checking for permission. "Glad you made it, kid," he said. "Wouldn't miss it." "Claudette put you at the side table. Hope that's okay. We're tight on space." The side table, 4 seats, Lydia, 2 of Claudette's Bridge Club friends, and me, 15 feet from the main table, where my father would sit beside his wife and blow out his candles. I was the blank space in the family narrative, positioned where I couldn't interrupt the story Claudette had spent 6 years writing. The thing about silence is that it isn't always passive. Sometimes silence is the sharpest answer. I sat. I ate nothing. The roast chicken cooled on my plate. The cornbread went untouched. Lydia glanced at me twice, something uncertain moving behind her eyes, but she didn't speak. The Bridge Club women talked about a cruise. I watched the room. Then Claudette stood. She tapped her champagne glass with a dessert fork. The string quartet stopped. 43 faces turned toward her like sunflowers tracking light. "I want to say a few words about my wonderful husband," she began. Her voice carried the practiced warmth of a woman who had rehearsed this in front of a mirror. "Frank Voss is a man who builds things. Buildings, businesses, relationships. He is the foundation of this family." She paused. Her gaze swept the room and landed on me. "And I want to acknowledge that tonight, we have everyone together. Even Hadley." She smiled. The room smiled with her. For those of you who don't know, Hadley is Frank's daughter from his first marriage. She lives in the D.C. area now. She works in, what is it, Hadley? IT support? Data security consulting, I said. My voice didn't shake. My hands stayed folded in my lap. Right. Claudette nodded slowly, the way you nod at a child who insists they saw a dragon. "And we're so glad she could join us tonight. It's been a hard few years for Hadley. Some of you know that. She's had some struggles, health-wise, mentally, and we just want her to know she's supported. We love her. We want to help her get better." The room murmured. Sympathetic glances. A woman near the window pressed her hand to her chest. They thought silence meant guilt. Claudette wasn't finished. I'll be honest with everyone here tonight, because Frank and I believe in transparency. She set down her champagne. Hadley has made some claims over the years about her work, about being involved in military operations, about having security clearances. She let out a small, pitying laugh. She's a glorified tech support worker, and I say that with love. But the uniform she sometimes references, the career she describes, it doesn't exist. It hasn't existed for years. She's a broken woman clinging to a uniform she doesn't deserve. Even the candle flames seem to hesitate. 43 people staring. My father's eyes fixed on the tablecloth. Lydia's fork frozen halfway to her mouth. The string quartet didn't know whether to play. Denial, I would learn, was their specialty. But Claudette had made it into an art form. She had crafted this story carefully. The missed funeral became a rehab stint. The vague job descriptions became evidence of delusion. The absence of visible medals, because every commendation I'd ever received carried a classified stamp, became proof that I'd fabricated my entire career. She painted a picture of a woman living in delusion, and every person in that room believed it. I looked at my father. He wouldn't meet my eyes. I looked at Claudette. She was already reaching for her phone beneath the table. I caught the motion, the slight tilt of her wrist, the glow of the screen against the linen napkin draped across her lap. I knew exactly what she was doing. Because 3 hours earlier, sitting in the parking lot of a gas station off Interstate 16, I had opened my laptop, logged into the administrative backend of the Voss family email server, the server I had personally configured 4 years ago when Frank asked me to set up something secure for Claudette's charity work, and downloaded every email Claudette Miller had sent in the past 6 months, every draft, every deleted message, every attachment, including the one she'd sent 24 hours ago to a journalist at the Coastal Ledger, a regional tabloid with a taste for scandal. The subject line read, "Military officer mental breakdown, daughter of local businessman living double life." The journalist had replied within hours, "This is incredible. Can you send more dirt, photos, discharge papers?" Claudette had written back, "I'll get you everything you need after the party. She'll be here. You can see for yourself how unstable she is." That email was sitting in my encrypted drive, along with the SMTP logs, the metadata, and the IP address that traced every message back to the desktop in Claudette's private study. The desktop connected to the server I built, the server whose admin password she never thought to change, because she never thought to ask who built it. What they didn't know, yet, was that the woman they'd written off as broken had read every word, every draft, every lie, and she had downloaded it all. Claudette set her phone down and smiled at the room. "To Frank," she said, raising her glass, "and to family, the real kind." I didn't lift my glass. I didn't move. Tomorrow, they'd call me something else entirely. Tomorrow, a black SUV would pull into this driveway, carrying a man whose stars outranked every title in this room combined. Tomorrow, the woman they pitied would be addressed as Commander. But not tonight. Tonight, I sat at the side table. I folded my napkin beside my untouched plate, and I let Claudette Miller toast to my destruction with champagne my father paid for, on china my mother chose, in a house where my photos no longer hung. That was the last night I stayed silent. The gala wound down the way these things always do. Guests drifting toward the door in clusters of 2 and 3, exchanging air kisses and promises to do this again soon. Claudette positioned herself at the foyer like a toll booth, collecting compliments and squeezing hands. My father stood beside her, his smile fixed, his eyes glassy from bourbon and the specific kind of exhaustion that comes from performing happiness for 4 straight hours. I helped Lydia clear dishes. She didn't say much. She carried plates to the kitchen with the careful efficiency of someone who had learned young that being useful was the safest way to be invisible. I recognized the posture. I'd invented it. "You okay?" she asked once near the sink. "I'm fine." She studied me for a moment longer than necessary. Then she nodded and went back to clearing. By 11, the house was empty. The caterers packed their chafing dishes into a white van. The string quartet folded their stands and left through the side gate. Claudette disappeared upstairs without a word. Frank lingered in the kitchen doorway, watching me rinse the last of the crystal flutes. "Hadley." "Yeah, Dad." He opened his mouth, closed it, rubbed the back of his neck. "She means well," he said. I placed the flute on the drying rack. I didn't turn around. "Good night, Dad." He stood there another 5 seconds. I counted them. Then the creak of the third stair. The same crack near the bottom. The one I'd made when I was 12, racing down Christmas morning in socks. And he was gone. The house went still. The grandfather clock in the hallway marked midnight with a sound like someone clearing their throat. The jasmine-heavy air pressed through the kitchen window screen, thick and sweet, the kind of sweetness that coats the back of your throat and stays. I dried my hands. I walked to the study. The study was Claudette's domain now. She'd redecorated it 2 years after the wedding, replaced my father's oak bookshelves with white lacquer, swapped the leather chair for something velvet and teal. But the network closet in the back corner was still mine. The small black box tucked behind a stack of decorative baskets, blinking green every 4 seconds. The Voss family server, 16 terabytes. Dual redundancy. Encrypted backup partitions. I'd configured myself with an administrative passphrase Claudette had never once asked about. Because to Claudette, the server was invisible. It was infrastructure. It was plumbing. It was the kind of thing that IT support people handled. Beneath her notice, beneath her curiosity, beneath her. I sat at the desk. I opened my laptop. The screen cast a blue glow across the white walls. I entered the admin credentials I'd built into the root directory 4 years ago. Credentials that lived in a partition Claudette's desktop couldn't even see. The SMTP logs loaded in 11 seconds. 6 months of outbound mail. Sorted by sender. Filtered by domain. I'd already pulled the critical chain at the gas station that afternoon, but now I wanted the full architecture of what she'd built. The complete construction of her lie. There were 14 emails to the journalist at the Coastal Ledger. A man named Gary Davis. His reply chain started casual. "Interesting, tell me more," and escalated within a week to requests for documentation, photographs, and a quote from a medical professional. Claudette had provided fabricated context in every response. She described my erratic behavior at family gatherings. She referenced a hospitalization that never happened. She claimed she had sources within the military who confirmed my discharge. She had no sources. She had assumptions dressed up as evidence and delivered with the confidence of a woman who had never once been challenged. I downloaded the complete chain. Every draft, every deleted revision, and there were 7 revisions of the initial pitch email alone, each one sharpening the language, each one making me sound more unstable, more dangerous, more pitiful. I captured the metadata. I logged the IP addresses, I mirrored the attachment history, including a photograph she'd pulled from my father's old laptop, me at 23, in uniform, standing outside the academy gates, with a caption she'd drafted but never sent. "This is the last verified photo of Hadley in any military capacity." The last verified photo, as if she'd conducted an investigation, as if she had jurisdiction over the truth. I closed the laptop. I sat in the dark for a long time. Some wars aren't fought with fists, they're won in what happens next. At 6 in the morning, I made coffee in my mother's old percolator. The kitchen was quiet. Through the window, the moss-covered oak stood in the gray pre-dawn light, like witnesses who had agreed to say nothing. I wore a plain white shirt, sleeves to the elbow. My matte gray lapel pin was fastened to the collar. A small geometric shape, no bigger than a thumbnail. To anyone in that house, it looked like costume jewelry. A simple triangle bisected by two horizontal lines, something you'd find in a clearance bin at a department store. It was not from a department store. That pin identified me as a member of the Ghost 6 architecture team, a non-disclosed unit embedded within the NSA's Cyber Operations Division. Fewer than 40 people in the entire Department of Defense had the clearance to know what that symbol meant. To everyone else, it was nothing. A decoration. A quirk. Claudette had once pointed at it during Thanksgiving, 2 years ago. "What is that little thing?" she'd asked. "Some kind of sorority pin?" The table laughed. I'd said nothing. I adjusted the pin on my collar and took a sip of my wine. It wasn't spite. It wasn't pride. It was operational security. I stood on the back porch with my coffee and watched the sun lift over the savanna tree line. The humidity was already building, the kind of morning where the air feels like it has weight, like it's leaning against you, testing how long you'll stand. At 7:15, Lydia came downstairs. She poured cereal. She sat across from me at the kitchen island and ate in silence. "Can I ask you something?" she said. "Sure." "Last night, what Mom said. About the Navy stuff." She pushed a Cheerio around the bowl with her spoon. "Was any of it true?" I held my gaze on her. 22 years old, her mother's cheekbones, her father's uncertainty. "Which part? The breakdown part, the discharge part?" "No." She nodded slowly. The Cheerio completed its orbit. "Then why didn't you say anything?" "Because even if I had told you, you wouldn't have believed it." Lydia looked down at her bowl. She didn't argue. That told me everything. At 8:45, Claudette descended the staircase in a cream linen dress and gold sandals, her phone already in hand, her voice already performing. "Frank, did you call the landscaper? The hydrangeas by the gate look absolutely criminal. And Hadley. Oh, you're still here. I thought you had an early flight." "Changed it," I said. Claudette's eyes narrowed for exactly 1 second. Then the performance resumed. "Well, lovely. We're having brunch on the veranda if you'd like to join. Try to be pleasant." I carried my coffee to the veranda. Frank was already seated. Scrambled eggs, country ham, grits with cheddar and chives, a pitcher of sweet tea catching the morning light. The table was set for 4. Frank, Claudette, Lydia, and one extra place that Claudette had clearly not intended for me, because she made a point of moving the silverware aside and pulling a chair from the patio set. "There," she said. "Now we all fit." I sat. I ate nothing. At 9:12, the sound of tires on gravel. It was faint at first, the crunch of a heavy vehicle moving slowly up the long drive, deliberate and unhurried. Claudette didn't notice. She was lecturing Frank about the landscaping budget. Lydia heard it. Her head turned toward the front of the house. Frank paused, a forkful of eggs suspended. I set my coffee down gently. The vehicle stopped. A door opened, then a second, then a third. Footsteps on the front porch. Not casual, not social. Each footfall measured and deliberate. The cadence of dress shoes backed by military posture. The kind of rhythm civilians can feel before they understand. Claudette finally looked up. "Frank, are you expecting someone?" Frank shook his head. The doorbell didn't ring. 3 knocks, spaced evenly. The kind of knock that isn't asking permission. Frank stood. Claudette stood faster. She reached the front door first. I heard her open it. I heard the brief, specific silence that occurs when a civilian encounters something their social script has no answer for. "Can I help you?" Claudette's voice carried the particular pitch of a woman who believes her doorstep is sovereign territory. A voice responded. Deep, unhurried, the vocal equivalent of a steel cable under tension. "Ma'am, I'm looking for Lieutenant Commander Voss." The silence that followed had physical weight. Even the wind chime on the porch seemed to hesitate, its brass tubes frozen mid-sway. Claudette recovered first. "I'm sorry. Who?" I stood from the veranda table. I walked through the kitchen, through the foyer, and arrived at the front door. Claudette was blocking the threshold with her body. Beyond her, filling the porch, stood 3 naval officers in dress whites, so crisp the fabric looked architectural. Behind them, a black Suburban idled in the driveway, its engine a low, patient hum. The man in front was tall, silver-haired, square-shouldered in the way that only decades of service can build. Not gym-made, but duty-forged, like the posture itself was load-bearing. His chest carried more ribbons than anyone in that house had likely seen in real life. 4 stars gleamed on each shoulder board, catching the Savannah sun and throwing tiny points of light across the porch ceiling. Admiral Thomas Wright, Director of U.S. Cyber Command, his gaze moved past Claudette as though she were furniture. It found me standing 6 feet behind her in a white shirt and gray slacks, coffee still warm in my hand, the matte gray pin on my collar catching the light from the open door. His eyes locked onto the pin. Held. Something shifted in his expression. Not surprise. Recognition. The way you recognize a language you haven't heard spoken aloud in months. He straightened. His right hand rose to his brow in a salute so precise it could have been measured with instruments. "Commander Voss, ma'am." He didn't salute Claudette. He didn't acknowledge Frank, who had appeared behind me in the foyer, a napkin still tucked into his collar. He didn't glance at Lydia, frozen in the kitchen doorway with a glass of sweet tea. He saluted me. The 2 officers flanking him mirrored the gesture, synchronized, sharp, their white gloves cutting the morning air. 3 salutes, directed at the woman in the plain white shirt, the IT support worker, the broken woman clinging to a uniform she didn't deserve. And suddenly, 4 people, including my stepmother, went very, very quiet. If you've ever been underestimated by people who don't know the real story, hit that like button and subscribe. Claudette's hand was still on the door. Her knuckles had gone white. She looked at the Admiral. She looked at the ribbons on his chest. She looked at the stars on his shoulders. Then she looked at me. The champagne glass from last night might as well have still been in her hand. It would have shattered. "The Admiral," she whispered. The color drained from her face in stages. Forehead first, then cheeks, then lips, as though someone were pulling a shade down from the inside. "He's here for her." Admiral Wright lowered his salute. He stepped across the threshold without being invited. A motion so natural, so unquestioned, that Claudette physically stepped backward to make room, her gold sandals scuffing against the hardwood. "Commander," he said, his voice carrying the quiet authority of a man who commanded the digital infrastructure of the United States military. "We need to speak. Privately." His gaze shifted, just briefly, to Claudette, then back to me. "It concerns a security matter related to your operational cover." Frank's napkin fell from his collar. It drifted to the floor like a white flag. "Ma'am," the Admiral said again, "we're here to debrief you." I looked at Admiral Wright. I looked at the 3 salutes still echoing in the silence of that foyer. I looked at my father, whose face had gone the color of old paper. "Of course, Admiral," I said. "The study." I turned and walked down the hallway. Admiral Wright followed. His 2 officers took flanking positions at the study door, parade rest, hands behind their backs, eyes forward. They didn't need to say a word. Their posture said everything. "This room belongs to someone now, and it isn't you." Claudette took 1 step forward. The officer on the left, a lieutenant commander whose name tape read Grant, shifted his weight. Not aggressively, just enough. She stopped. The study door closed behind us. Admiral Wright surveyed the room. The white lacquer shelves, the teal velvet chair, the decorative baskets hiding the server closet in the corner. His mouth didn't move, but something behind his eyes cataloged every detail the way I'd seen him catalog a SIF briefing. Fast, total, and unforgiving. "Sit down, Commander." I sat. He remained standing. 24 hours ago, a flag was triggered on a media monitoring protocol attached to your cover identity. A journalist named Gary Davis at a regional publication called the Coastal Ledger submitted a FOIA request for service records connected to your Social Security number. That request was intercepted and escalated to my office within 6 hours. He paused. The request cited a source who claimed to have first-hand knowledge of a psychiatric discharge. The source was not named, but the digital fingerprint on the initial communication traced back to an IP address registered to this residence. He looked at me. "You already know this." "Yes, sir." "How long have you had the server logs?" 14 hours. He nodded once, the kind of nod that carries no judgment, only confirmation. "When you said you built the architecture for this home network, you meant it literally." "I configured the server, the email routing, the backup partitions, and the admin credentials 4 years ago, at my father's request." Claudette used the system for her charity correspondence, her personal email, and apparently her campaign to destroy my career. She never changed the root password. She never asked who had access. Because she didn't think to ask. Because she thought I did IT support. The faintest crack at the corner of Admiral Wright's mouth. Not a smile. A recognition. "Commander, I have to ask you something, and I need you to answer precisely." "Yes, sir." He leaned forward. His voice dropped. Not for secrecy, but for the weight of what he was about to say. "During Sentinel Shield, the relay architecture you designed for the Eastern Seaboard Grid Defense, the zero trust node that isolated the tertiary command layer from the compromised upstream feed. What was the encryption subroutine designation embedded in the response algorithm's third partition?" I didn't hesitate. Subroutine 7.3 alpha. It was flagged for latency drift exceeding response tolerance under stress test 11C. So I rebuilt the partition with a redundant handshake protocol before it went live. Admiral Wright straightened. That subroutine prevented the breach. $1.7 billion in infrastructure stayed online because of that handshake. He looked at me for a long moment. You are not IT support, Commander. You are a national asset, and someone in this house tried to burn you. He crossed the room and opened the study door. Mrs. Miller, Mr. Voss, please step inside. I heard Claudette's heels first, the click, click, click of a woman who still believed she controlled the tempo of every room she entered. Frank followed. Lydia trailed behind them, standing just inside the doorway, her arms crossed, her face unreadable. I had already opened my laptop. The screen displayed the family server's SMTP log interface. Timestamps, sender addresses, recipient domains, subject lines, projected through the study's wall-mounted display, the one Claudette had installed for her charity slideshows. 14 emails, rendered in black text on a white background, each one time-stamped, each one traceable, each one carrying Claudette's sender address like a signature at the bottom of her own indictment. Claudette looked at the screen. The first email was dated 6 months ago. Subject line: Military officer mental breakdown. Daughter of local businessman living double life. The body text filled the monitor in clean, scrollable detail. Her words, her phrasing, her fabrications, the journalist's responses nested beneath them. Can you send more dirt? And her replies, each revision more calculated than the last. 7 drafts of the initial pitch, each one sharpening the blade, each one making me smaller, more broken, more disposable. Claudette's hand found the back of the teal chair. She gripped it. Her knuckles were white marble. She stopped. Those are private. You had no right. I work in analysis, Claudette, I said. My voice was level, quiet, clinical. I analyzed your server logs. You should have changed the admin password I gave you. I let that sit. Even the fire crackling in the hearth seemed to quiet. Admiral Wright stepped forward. His voice carried the particular authority of a man who could end careers with a phone call and had done so before. Lieutenant Commander Voss is currently managing assets that protect your very ability to send an email, ma'am. She holds active, non-disclosed clearance above the level of most flag officers in the United States Navy. She has served in 4 operational theaters, designed the encrypted architecture for 3 separate fleet commands, and was personally credited by the National Security Agency for preventing a $1.7 billion infrastructure breach during Operation Sentinel Shield. He paused. Step away from the commander. Claudette didn't step away. She swayed. The color that had drained from her face at the front door had not returned. She looked like a woman standing in a room that had suddenly lost its floor. I didn't, she started. You did, Admiral Wright said. I didn't know she was. You didn't ask, I said. Frank's mouth opened, then closed. His eyes were fixed on the screen, on the emails, on the timestamps, on the 7 drafts that documented his wife's methodical dismantling of his daughter's identity. He looked like a man watching his house burn from the inside, and only now understanding he'd been sleeping next to the arsonist. Hadley, he said. His voice cracked on the second syllable. I didn't respond. I reached into the folder beside my laptop and removed a sealed legal envelope. White. Crisp. The return address bore the office of Captain Marcus Reed, U.S. Navy, Judge Advocate General's Corps. I placed it on the desk in front of Claudette. This is a defamation suit filed on my behalf by Captain Marcus Reed through JAG's Civilian Liaison Office. It names you as the sole defendant. The amount is $54,000 in damages, covering reputational harm, emotional distress, and the cost of a counterintelligence review triggered by Gary Davis's FOIA request, which your emails initiated. Claudette stared at the envelope. She didn't touch it. You can't. Her voice broke. I was trying to help this family. I was trying to help her. You weren't trying to help anyone. My voice didn't rise. My hands stayed folded on the desk. You were trying to erase me. You spent 6 years telling everyone I was broken, because broken was the only version of me you could control. I stood. Slowly. The chair didn't scrape. The room was so quiet I could hear the server humming in the corner, the green light blinking every 4 seconds, steady as a pulse. You didn't want the truth, Claudette. You wanted a confession, but you forgot one thing. I looked at her. I built the system you used to bury me. Claudette's knees gave, not dramatically, not like a movie. She simply folded, downward and sideways, into the teal velvet chair she'd bought to replace my father's. The legal envelope sat untouched on the desk. Her mouth opened and closed without sound. The woman who had commanded 43 guests with a champagne toast 12 hours ago could not produce a single word. Lydia stepped forward from the doorway. She looked at the screen. She read the emails, her mother's words, her mother's lies, her mother's careful architecture of destruction. Then she looked at me. I'm sorry, she said. Quiet. Steady. 22 years old, and already understanding something her mother never would. I nodded. Once. That was enough. Admiral Wright turned to Frank. Mr. Voss, your wife's communications triggered a counterintelligence review that consumed 24 hours of operational resources and temporarily flagged your daughter's clearance for audit. That clearance protects systems that safeguard the Eastern Seaboard's critical infrastructure. The review has been resolved. Commander Voss's record is clean. But the damage your household caused to an active intelligence operation is now a matter of federal record. Frank looked at me. His eyes were wet. His hands hung at his sides like he'd forgotten what they were for. Hadley, I didn't know. You didn't ask. He flinched. The words landed exactly where I aimed them. Admiral Wright collected his cover from the desk. He placed it under his arm. Commander, whenever you're ready, the car is outside. I closed the laptop. I unplugged the display cable. I walked to the corner and powered down the server. 16 terabytes of Claudette's own evidence, mirrored and archived on an encrypted drive that was already in my bag. I walked out of the study, down the hall, past the mantel with its photographs where I didn't exist, past the kitchen where my mother's percolator still sat on the counter, past the foyer where 3 officers in dress whites parted to let me through. On the front porch, I stopped. The Savannah morning had thickened into full humidity, the air pressing against my skin, jasmine and cut grass, and the faint mineral smell of the marsh beyond the tree line. The black Suburban waited. Its engine hummed. I didn't look back at the house, not out of spite, not out of pride, but because I no longer needed to step into a place that asked me to shrink. The Admiral walked beside me. At the car, he paused. For what it's worth, Commander, the relay architecture you built during Sentinel Shield is still operational, still clean, still protecting the grid. He opened the door. Some things grow more powerful the quieter they are. I got in the car. The door closed. The gravel crunched beneath the tires as we pulled away. That was it. 6 months later, the Coastal Ledger published a full retraction. Gary Davis issued a written apology. His editor cited a failure of source verification and quietly reassigned him to community events coverage. The retraction ran on page 3. The original story had never been published. Admiral Wright's office had intercepted it before it went to print. But the retraction acknowledged the unverified claims that had been submitted, and the potential legal exposure the publication had narrowly avoided. Claudette signed a consent decree. $54,000 in damages. No admission of guilt. Her attorney negotiated that. But the decree included a permanent injunction barring her from making public statements about my career, my service record, or my mental health. The injunction carried federal weight. Captain Reed made sure of that. Frank filed for divorce within the year. I heard about it from Lydia, who called me on a Tuesday evening in October. Her voice careful, almost formal, like she was reading from a script she'd written and rewritten. "He moved into an apartment near the river," she said. "He asked about you. He wanted to know if you'd talked to him." "Not yet." "Okay." A pause. "He kept one of your academy photos, the one from graduation. He put it on the mantle." I didn't say anything for a moment. The line hummed between us. Savannah to Fort Meade. 800 miles of fiber optic cable carrying a silence that, for once, didn't feel like absence. "That's a start," I said. Lydia enrolled in a cybersecurity certificate program that fall. She didn't tell me directly. I found out through the enrollment verification that crossed my desk. She'd listed me as a professional reference. I approved it without comment. Some things don't need words. They need proof. The $54,000 went to a cybersecurity training program for military spouses, a nonprofit out of Norfolk that teaches network administration and digital forensics to partners of deployed service members. I made the donation anonymously. The program director sent a thank you letter addressed to Ghost 6 benefactor. I don't know how she knew the designation. I didn't ask. I work at Fort Meade now. Same SCIF. Same blue monitors. Same metallic taste of recycled air. Same hum of servers processing data streams that will never carry my name. No titles on the door. No plaques. No photographs. Just Hadley. Just the work. Just the quiet architecture of systems designed to hold when everything else breaks. Last month, I received a handwritten letter, no return address, postmarked Savannah. It was from my father. 3 sentences. His handwriting shaky, smaller than I remembered, pressed hard into the paper like he was afraid the words would blow away. "I'm proud of you. I should have said it sooner. I should have said it every day." No conditions. No advice. Just that. I folded the letter. I placed it in the top drawer of my desk, beside my service record and the matte gray pin I wear every day. Silence had always been the language of my life, but I understood now. Silence was never weakness. Silence was the architecture. It was the encrypted partition beneath the noise, the zero trust protocol that held when every other system failed. It was the foundation no one could see and no one could break, because no one knew it was there. There is power in patience. There is freedom in truth, even if it comes late. And there is a particular kind of strength in building something so quiet, so precise, so essential that the people who depend on it every single day never once think to ask who made it. I am no longer missing. If you enjoyed this story about quiet competence winning over loud arrogance, hit that like button and let me know what you think in the comments. And if you haven't subscribed yet, make sure to subscribe and ring that notification bell for more stories just like this one. Thanks for watching.